This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Gary Smith.
Welcome. Hi, Gary. By the way, we're going to do a quick hit here on Beyond, on a case that for a variety of reasons intrigues me. And it's not Britney Spears, and it's not the case out of North Carolina or Belize or Trump or anything else. It's the case of the homicide of Mollie Tibbets. And if anybody remembers, we've talked about this case, but there was a young man who was convicted, due to be sentenced, I believe, this morning.
Yeah.
And he was accused of killing Mollie Tibbets, confessing, leading police to her decomposing body. In a rather unorthodox move, the defense lawyers put him on the stand. He testified about two people who had actually done the killing, and that explained, and then they forced him to drive to dispose of her body. Right. And that was his explanation as to why he supposedly confessed, although it really wasn't a confession, which is why the judge limited it.
And there was
he did testify.
Right. And there was some weird
there
was some weird shenanigans with when he was read Miranda. So that was why some of his confession was not necessarily admitted.
Exactly. Good memory. And he was kind of roundly assumed to be an uphill battle, myself included, because I always feel like if you're leading the police to a body, that's about as bad a fact as you can get.
Adam would call that an indicator.
Yeah, I call it bad fact. And if you're the defense, I had speculated and feel bad about it, but that apparently they didn't offer a plea deal, and that's why, forced to go to trial and everything else. Well, all of a sudden, the defense in this case, Gary, tell him what transpired this morning. He did not get sentenced this morning. The judge has now continued the matter for at least 12 days because, and I'll leave it up to Gary to give the summary.
Right. He's going to allow some time for new defense motions to be heard. Now, to back up a little bit on the story that you just told, when they did decide to put him on the stand and he gave his explanation of these two large men who had kidnapped him, their faces and arms were all covered so he couldn't identify them or give him any tattoos or anything like that. Apparently, while he was telling that story the same day, two separate individuals contacted police and said that they had heard of a man, or a set of men, who had bragged that they had committed the rape and murder. So at the same time he's telling this story, two people approach police and say, hey, we've heard this story too, and this is who we've heard it from. And it was another inmate, somebody who was also incarcerated. So it's a weird case because there was apparently one gentleman who is suspected of running a sex trafficking trap house within about 30 miles of where she was found. And, it's one of these stories that when I, as a layperson, read it, I get to the end and they start explaining how the judge is now going to delay this to hear these motions. And I go, well, there's more here. There has to be more here that the judge knows than what I just read in this article. Because from what I just read in this article, I don't understand why we would stop. He is convicted. We're good. We got to deal with sentencing. And then if there's appeals on his behalf, this stuff can come to light. But for this judge to stop before the sentencing, I would love your analysis on.
Well, I think that there was a couple of things. Number one, apparently there were two reports. One was an ex-girlfriend, and another was a person who had heard it from an inmate when incarcerated, as you mentioned. Apparently, both people, unrelated to one another, made these reports simultaneously or concurrently, very close in time, which is, as I would say, that gives you a little bit, it raises some kind of confidence factor. Now, if in fact there is unexplained DNA or part of the DNA in a profile that you can then run or conduct tests on, or if there are fingerprints or some other such things, or you've got cell phones and you can do cell phone triangulation on these people who are apparently involved. You've got a motion for new trial that would be what's called legal cause, stopping the judge from sentencing him, which is so far what has happened. It's apparently given this judge enough pause to allow them to develop this. And the defense is requesting that the prosecution turn over some other facts surrounding a disappearance and a sex trafficking ring, and made the statement, and by the way, it had kind of gone through my head too, for a rural county, what they're talking about, and a sex trafficking ring and a trap house and everything else. It's an awful lot of activity happening in one sparsely populated rural area. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just really hard to believe the way this is all developed and all of this stuff that it seems too close to not take a good look at, which is, it appears the judge agrees.
I think the judge agrees. I mean, given all of the publicity surrounding this, given all of the wind up to this case initially, because remember, this was the poster child for an undocumented alien, illegal immigrant, whatever you want to say, who had come here and committed crime, and it became kind of fodder for election politics.
Yep.
If it turns out that, in fact, it wasn't an undocumented, but it was a trafficking operation gone awry, which is what the defense seems to be suggesting. And they've now identified at least one of the two people that he testified to without knowing, separate and apart. Because remember, he testified, and then these supposedly unrelated two reports came in identifying specifically somebody who was running this house, running the operation, and who knew there. They've got a lot more meat on this bone than generally you do in these kinds of cases, where you want to point at somebody else and said, some other guy did it.
If this prediction, I'll take a page out of Adam Carolla's book. If this comes to pass, that this starts with a new trial or just anything positive for the defense, is the county or the prosecution in any hot water for not providing proper discovery in the first place?
The defense is already setting that up, I believe. They're already saying that the prosecution had information. The information at a prima facie level, meaning at first blush, looked like it was related, should have been disclosed. If it had been disclosed, they might have tried to develop this before there was a verdict. So yes, and the prosecution, to give their side, has said that it's outrageous that the defense is trying to connect these things, blah, blah, blah. But there is some kind of nefarious activity happening in that general geographical area as to where this took place. And whether it's related or not, clearly the defense has an obligation to investigate that. And I would argue, obviously through my defense prism, that the not only does the defense have a obligation, but the prosecution should err on the side of turning that stuff over. And if they think that it's unrelated, that's fine. Just make a motion to have it excluded, absent some other evidence that would corroborate it. So the defense, breaking it down, the defense is going to need to do something to corroborate these statements. And like I said, cell phone triangulation, DNA, print work, forensic work, something. But if they have anything that starts to corroborate this, I predict this case is going to get kicked over again, meaning continued again past the, I think, current July 27th date.
Well, my favorite thing about Beyond a Reasonable Doubt is that we cover whatever we want for that particular day and that particular episode. And this was it today, but we're going to keep an eye on both this case, on the not Kavanaugh, but Murdaugh case. That's a mistake. Actually, interesting, Mark. That's a mistake that people won't hear me make for 2 more days, because that's in our Saturday episode that we pre-recorded.
Right, you're predicting your impression.
Yeah, I have a mistake coming on Saturday, about 31 minutes into the show. But we'll keep an eye on all those cases and more, and we will see you on Saturday for that mistake and much more, and we'll see you next week for more Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. Mark, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Gary. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. Stay tuned for more bonus episodes coming soon.